We are about a week away from the Major League Baseball winter meetings, and the offseason is still in its early stages. We have seen the non-tender deadline pass, the Rule 5 eligible protection list, and not much movement on the free agent market. I've decided to bring my yearly tradition from my personal channel to the Mets Weekly channel and do my 2024 New York Mets Dream offseason. This is a video that I've done every year on my channel since having some fun on YouTube, doing what I would do in the GM spot. In previous years, it was Billy Epler. This year, it's David Stearns, and I will be building my 26-man opening day roster and just playing it as a fun little armchair GM. See if I can build a better roster than the Mets' current GM, and David Stearns has a high bar to beat. Again, we're going to build a 26-man roster, and we're not going to go that crazy in the depth with the 40-man roster. 26-man roster with payroll. Let's clarify the $50 million, in which you guys see the current payroll with the Mets. The Mets are paying three players, James McCann, Justin Verlander, and Max Scherzer, close to $50 million. That will be added to the Mets' additional payroll. Steve Cohen has said in press conferences that is money already spent and should not be and will not be like previous regimes where, let's say, Robinson Cano or the Yoenis Cespedes money would hold back the team spending. Steve Cohen has said that's already money spent. So we're going to act like, obviously, it's going to be on the payroll, but that money is already spent and move on. To bring the Mets back to competitiveness, David Stearns has made it clear that he does not want this to be a full-on tank year, but to still be a competitive roster. So not be competing for World Series, but getting back to a competitive, more respectable level. So that's what this is going to be. So this isn't going to be some big, let's just spend them. We're getting back to World Series contention. Let's get the Mets back to being a competitive team to go in that 2025, 2026 to get back to World Series contention. So let's get that preference ahead. So we all know not to expect this grand spending all the money like we've seen in the past. Let's make this as a calm collective, building this team back to being a respectable contender in the National League. And let's start with everybody's favorite deals, and let's start making some moves with other teams. Let's make a few trades as a yearly thing. I'll obviously make a few trades to add some players to the team because, again, just because we got a lot of money, now we have a little bit more of prospect capital to flip to add other star players to this team. Start off with a trade to add some need, and that is outfield and power corner outfielders. The Mets obviously needing at least two, which we've watched our checklist. We've said we need some outfielders. And let's go with one of the better guys on the trade market. And let's call it the Baltimore Orioles, who are in a weird state of having a lot of good players, young and on contract years. Obviously, Anthony Santander, who is a consistent 30-homer corner outfielder, switch-hitting bat, is going to be a pending UFA. And you know how the Baltimore Orioles act. They are not a big market team, and they also have so much young talent, guys like Keston Kjerstad and Colton Cowser coming through, as well as other infield options who could play the outfield. So Anthony Santander, as well as in the major league options with Austin Hayes and Cedric Mullins. Santander could be the odd man out in Baltimore, and then they could see to move Santander for a few assets in this one. And then what Baltimore would be acquiring, and that is first baseman DH Mark Vientos and outfield prospect Ryan Clifford. Why does this make sense for each team? Start with the Mets, obviously getting Santander. They're getting a guy who can be a 30-homer power bat, middle of the lineup protection piece for Pete Alonso that they desperately need. And they're giving him the ability to switch hit, can play the corner outfield, can be DH. And the Mets can use their financial power and give him potentially extension to not let him hit the market and be able to add him and keep him long term. So giving up a guy like Ryan Clifford, it doesn't hurt as much. Obviously, Clifford was one of the pieces in the Verlander trade with him and Drew Gilbert. Clifford has crazy high power potential, but again, if you're trying to be a competitive team, Ryan Clifford's probably 2 to 3 years away. Ryan Clifford may not be a part of this team, and you get a guy in Anthony Santander who you desperately need. Put in that middle of the lineup, can put in that corner piece and be penciling in 30 homers from both sides of the plate and add some more power protection to this lineup and giving Pete Alonso some actual protection. Let's go to the other trade, and let's start. If you've watched any of our content, you know you've seen this trade coming, and that is calling up Jerry Dipoto. They still want a second baseman who hits for high contact. I wonder if the Mets have one of those. Jeff McNeil would be heading to Seattle, and the Mets would eat a little bit of the money, as well as giving a sweetener of Tyler McGill for Brian Wu. And I could already see Tyler McGill is a fan favorite for some, but let's be honest, he's never going to hit that potential that he could have with New York, and a fresh start for Tyler to go to one of the most underrated pitching factories in the game in Seattle, who just continues to turn out young pitching and as well turning out former Mets into pretty solid relievers, Tyler Salcedo and Paul Sewald, to just name a couple. And if he is this guy, he's not going to be that here. And he's also 28 years old. The Mets would be acquiring Brian Wu. They get 5 years younger, and they would get 3 years of pre-arbitration. He would have 6 years of team control with Brian Wu. 4.21 ERA, 87 2/3 innings pitched, 93 strikeouts over that, a FIP of 4.36 in 18 games pitched. A young, controllable, and I think he does have a higher ceiling than a guy like Tyler McGill, which again, at him being 23, McGill being 28, you get 5 years younger. Guy who's been in the major leagues to be your 5 starter while also giving the time with the Mets developing some young pitching prospects, guys like Blade Tidwell, guys like Christian Scott, Dom Hamill, coming throughout, guys potentially be in AAA to start the season. Now you would have a nice conglomerate of young pitching in the upper levels of the minor leagues, some in lower levels, and then obviously with the big league level with Brian Wu. And the Mets get a little bit of financial flexibility away from Jeff McNeil, which again, coming off a bad year. The Mets are really trying to let, Ronnie Mauricio, or they have the other guys of Luis Angel Acuna and Jet Williams, who they have a conglomerate of young second base prospects. And the 31-year-old Jeff McNeil really, I'm not willing to, especially in today's game of him being this, I have to put Jeff McNeil in the lineup. He has to be here. You move a little bit of money. You get younger. You get a little bit of financial flexibility. And again, financial relief doesn't matter in the Cohen regime. But, hey, you're going to have to spend in other positions. We're going to have to today. So you clear out some money. You clear a little bit of long-term money with McNeil. Seattle gets what they want, a little more contact in it. He can go be their leadoff hitter or their 9-hole hitter and be, a table setter for them, which they desperately need. The Mets get a nice, young, controllable pitching arm. So let's get to free agency, and let's start with starting pitching. And let's start with a guy who's not even going to pitch for the New York Mets. 2 spots in the rotation. Let's start with the most surprising non-tender candidate, and that is Brandon Woodruff, who most likely will not pitch for you in 2024. But again, if the Mets are trying to let this year play out and then try to be competitive in 2025, you would have a top flight arm ready to go in your rotation, your young pitching behind it, potentially 2 other free agent signings we'll get to in a second. You could have a very good rotation, have one of the better top 3s when healthy. I'd be giving him a 3-year deal for over $65 million. And let's clarify, this year he's only going to make $11 million. I do think that's going to be the biggest thing with Woodruff for what team he goes to. The team that's going to give him the most guaranteed money this year, even though he's rehabbing. The Mets, again, having that Cohen money, you could pay. Most teams are going to pay. You saw with Tyler Glasnow, $30 million extension. It was $5 million this past season. And then it was going to be 25 this year. And then overall, those next 2 years of $27 million AAV. That's about right. I don't think he's on that upper echelon of Garrett Cole levels. I think he's a top 25 starter in the game, but I think he's closer to 25 than he is to 1. But having him potentially be your number 2 or number 3 in your rotation to be a contender would be a very nice addition. This is a better version of John Curtis. And if you've seen them do it before, to get an actual legit arm would be the best thing for the Mets to do. Especially there was rumors that they were willing to trade him, getting just for cash. Definitely help. Let's get to pitchers who are going to help the 2024 roster and the rotation. And let's start with the biggest fish, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the highest paid and highest talked about starting pitcher on this market. The 25-year-old Japanese sensation had better numbers in Japan than Senzel. To get a 25-year-old frontline arm, it's going to cost a lot. And you've already seen you got the 3 big teams. You got Boston, you got the Mets, you got the Dodgers, you got the Yankees involved. It's going to be a bidding war, and whoever gets him is going to have to pay a lot. So my projected contract that I would try to get is an 8-year, $224 million deal with the AAV at $28 million with a year 5 opt-out, giving him the ability to opt out at his age 30 season. So let's say he comes over, he can get out after year 5 and test the market again. And there is some question marks. Again, can he translate? And will lightning strike twice for the Mets? Obviously, last year they went out and got Yokota Senga, and he was absolutely amazing. Finished 2nd in Rookie of the Year. Coming over to a different country and having the success that they did have in the NPB, coming that to translate into the major leagues. That is the risk you play. But hey, the upside definitely outweighs the negative. And let's get to the number 3 starter. And there's been plenty of trade, and we've said on the show that the Mets need to trade for one starter and then sign the other. And I do believe that there's a way. But the way I'm trying to build this rotation, especially when you're going after Yamamoto, who you still have a concern about because, again, he's not facing major league pitching, coming over and translating against saying it well, can it happen again, is I need somebody that I can rely on to eat innings. And again, kind of taking the blueprint from the Mets in 2021, having that Chris Bassett. You had your volatile arms with DeGrom and Scherzer, who you knew were going to have time off. Bassett was that consistent guy every game, taking ball at least 6 innings every start, whatever. And for me, I said it before his playoff run, and I know you're going to get a playoff tax. You're going to have to add on it. But if I am Steve, I am jumping back into that free agent market to save the draft, the prospect capital that you've built up. Continue to build that up because I think there might be some bigger trades. Maybe you make it the deadline or future offseason, and you have that ability. A guy like Jordan Montgomery. It's going to cost you a lot. 6 years, $147 million. I can already see a lot of money guaranteed. Have a third year opt out. No, for me, you never get a hard deal unless it's a superstar. There's always a way to get out of it at some point. So a year 3 opt out AAV about $24.5 million, and that's kind of what. And I'm maybe short siding Jordan Montgomery, especially if guys like Taijuan Walker last year were getting close to $20 million a year from the Philadelphia Phillies. The pitching market has gone crazy. You've seen depth at best 5 starters in Kyle Gibson, Kenta Maeda, Lance Lynn getting $10, $12 million for $24 million. Kind of maybe it's even a little low. I think he could get more, especially after the playoff run he got. But you know he can pitch in New York, and you need some dependability, and especially if you have him and Quintana, if he stays healthy, those two guys. You know, every start you're getting at least 5 to 6 innings of quality starts, which this team again can help the bullpen. Which again we made a big deal about the bullpen, which we'll get to in a second. You just add some more dependability in this rotation. Obviously, Senga was pretty healthy last year. You have Monty, Quintana coming off. Hopefully, he stays healthy, and then you can have your couple of question marks, or the young inexperience in Yamamoto and Wu as well with your depth with Lucchesi and Budo, and maybe what other 40-man roster guys you can bring in. Let's move on to the bullpen. Another position where there is too many holes to fill. Obviously, we have Edwin Diaz coming back off the injury. They picked up Brooks Raley, the $6.5 million team option, and then they obviously tendered Drew Smith a contract. So you have at least 3 arms. And then I have as a 4th spot Grant Hartwig. It could be any kind of Grant Hartwig. It could be any type of 40-man roster arm, because I don't think I see them going out and spending 5 pieces. I think 4 is even a lot, but I do think, especially with Stearns coming in, he needs time to develop those arms. He's not going to find those arms right away. Maybe he'll find one, but I think for him to churn out the arms that we expect like he did in Milwaukee, it takes time. So I could see David Stearns, and hopefully David Stearns takes that veteran approach this year. We don't like giving term to relievers. It's all 1+1 deals, and these are all 1+1 or natural 1-year deals. If you have the ability to, if you are a competitive team, these are great arms. If not, maybe at the deadline, these are very valuable trade chips, so you can potentially add more assets in the future. So let's start off with the biggest reliever out there, and let's talk Liam Hendriks. And I think this is filling the David Robertson role on a 2-year, $24 million deal, a $12 million guarantee this season with a $12 million second-year team option. The Mets did a good job last year, again, going out and getting David Robertson to fill that kind of semi-second closer, high-leverage setup man, and that could be this year's Liam Hendriks. I do not bring back Adam Ottavino. I don't think they should be trying to go out and bring back David Robertson as much as he might want to come back, unless it's on a very, very, very cheap deal, which I doubt he does. I think you've done that, with those veteran guys. Liam Hendriks, obviously coming off injury, beat cancer, but he's a guy when he's healthy, and, he's had like 5 consecutive really good years. Obviously, they should stop that. But when he's been healthy, he's been one of the best relievers out there. And to add him to be that secondary closer and main setup man who we've seen, he has done that role well in the 9th inning and in the 8th inning. To have that, again, kind of shortening the game down. Obviously, we know Edwin Diaz is the best reliever, or throw Liam Hendriks in that conversation, can shorten the inning with Raley. Then you're starting to build some depth. And then you have to build the secondary part of the bullpen. And this has been the biggest problem with the Mets, is the middle relievers. They've had so many garbage, or, well, here's a guy who has one good thing going to him, and they just can't find those guys in the middle reliefs. And this is where the Mets end up losing games, because they have been using negative assets in the bullpen. So again, there's a very vast conglomerate, a robust, you can say, relief market this year on the free agent market. And go grab a bunch of those guys. And let's start with Ryan Stanek on a 1-year, $8 million deal coming over from the Houston Astros. Again, a guy who can bring hard fastball, big strikeout guy. That's much desperately needs more velocity, more just energy, and just fear. Because the Mets bullpen has been very, we made the joke, bland, basic. There's no fear besides Edwin Diaz, when you come in the game, all right, you're facing high velocity, you're facing a guy who's intimidating, as well as Robert Stevenson on a 3-year, $27 million deal with AAV at $9 million. The second year would be a player option, and the third year would be a team option. This is a guy who was a former top prospect of the Cincinnati Reds, jumped around from the Colorado Rockies, went back to the Reds. He was traded from the Rockies and back to the Reds. And then last year ended the season with Tampa Bay, and they fixed this. And again, Tampa Bay doing what they do best, turning these guys, these journeymen or untapped potential guys, into legit back-end arms. Again, he's a younger option, really a 1-year deal. Obviously, if he has another good season, you can use his player option to get back onto the free agent market. And last, to finish off the pen, another reclamation project fixed by the Tampa Bay Rays. And that is left-handed reliever Jake Diekman on a 1-year, $6 million deal. It's made it kind of a joke that the Mets have not had two lefties in their bullpen, and having Brooks Raley be that main lefty, and then having Jake Diekman, who, again, we make, Brooks is a really funky three-quarter soft tossing lefty, to have a weird three-quarter velocity lefty coming out of the pen. Jake Diekman, again, he's had his best years with the White Sox. He's been a trade target, it seems like, or a free agent target from the Mets, it seems like, every year. Why not bring him back on a cheap 1-year deal to have a second lefty, a little more velocity, and a different look, and having potentially two lefties in the bullpen, which we seem like we haven't had two quality lefties in God knows how long. There's definitely a walk problem with Diekman. But when you can have, two quality lefties, which the Mets desperately need to fill out a bullpen, it helps out a rookie manager to have a pretty solid bullpen. Now you've got five legit arms that you can trust, and then you can start seeing, and gives these time for David Stearns to start developing throughout the years those young, up-and-coming controllable arms. So let's get to the offensive category. We've already brought in Anthony Santander to play right field, so let's go out and add some more outfield and DH options. We are tired of the platoon idea with the DH, and we desperately need another left fielder who can actually provide a little bit of power. And let's start with the starting left fielder, a guy that I have been punching the table for, especially on a cheap deal like this could be, and that is Hunter Renfroe on a 2-year, $18 million deal at a $9 million a year AAV with a second-year mutual optioning, and the 1-year, $9 million deal for a guy who could potentially hit 25 homers. Defense isn't great. You could stick him out in left field. He's got an absolute cannon of an arm. But again, in that second tier of power, which this team's desperately, again, we say needs power, Renfroe can be just a quality upgrade over Mark Canha, upgrade over, in this, let's play hypothetical, if Starling Marte can get back to a quarter of what he was in 2021, maybe making Hunter Renfroe then your kind of fourth outfielder. It makes a lot more sense to be that fourth outfield type. But again, if Hunter Renfroe's in your lineup every night, every year, you can guarantee he's going to hit about 25 homers, driving 60 to 70 runs, OPS around 700. He's become kind of a league average bat. It makes a lot of sense, especially if you're not going out. Let's say, because I've made the trade for Anthony Santander, I'm not going out and getting Teoscar Hernandez. You cannot always shop at the top of the market, and me going out and getting Santander to play right makes me out of the Teoscar Hernandez, but does not take me out of the DH conversation. And let's get to the new DH. You see Renfroe's in left, Santander's in right. Why not add absolutely more power and more homers? And that is Jorge Soler, a 3-year, $48 million deal, $16 million a year. No opt-outs. It's just a hard 3-year deal for a guy who can hit 30 homers and be the DH this team's desperately needed for so damn long. The year that Pete broke the rookie home run record, Jorge Soler led the American League with 48 homers. So he has that ability easily in his sleep, if he stays healthy, drop 40 bombs, 30 to 40 bombs, and be the DH this team's desperately needed. And instead of going out and platooning and building, just go out and get one of the better power hitting outfielders out, again, at a relatively solid price, $16 million a year, terms 3 years. Maybe you would have to go to fourth, but to add a guy in this lineup that you desperately need to add one, power protection for Santander, and if maybe again at times he's the power protection for Pete Alonso, and you could have a middle of the lineup with 3 guys that can potentially hit 35 or more homers, it would definitely be a very beautiful sight. And let's get to the final 2 bench bats. Again, filling out the rest of the roster. These aren't going to be very sexy names. They will fill roles. And let's start off with a guy who was just non-tendered, and that is Nick Senzel on a 1-year, $1 million deal. Again, highly touted prospect, highly drafted player. It gives you some positional flexibility to play shortstop, can play second base, and can play the outfield. The biggest bugaboo with Nick never healthy, taking him away from being a full-time everyday player and making him a bench bat who can, for a guy like Senzel, who's always hit left-handed pitching pretty well, can be a platoon guy who can play up the middle and play the outfield. Again, just kind of a better version of Luis Guillorme, and just filling that role of being like, hey, he can play second, he can play the corner outfield, he can play center field if need be. And instead of trading for guys like Tommy Edman or Jonathan India, just a 1-year, $1 million, a couple $1 million that makes you feel better. Just utility cheap option. And this is what this team needs. Again, you have your stars, and Lindor's always see him. You can punch in 160 games. Second base, you're going to run Ronnie, or you can run, Luis Angel Acuna, Jet. Like, you have guys that can play every day, or kids that can play, majority of the spots. Senzel can just be a spot start bench guy who can give you some versatility, which is an upgrade from what you've had in the past. And let's get to the final guy. It just makes too much sense, and that is going out and just bringing Jesse Winker home at this point. It should not cost. I got him 1 year, $6 million. Can be your typical fourth or fifth outfielder who could be a DH, let's say against right-handed pitching, a left-handed bat off the bench. Just to be a guy who can provide you, if not, a bounce back season, you're getting a buy low candidate. Again, it's $6 million. The Mets have paid $6 million for a lot worse players. who can be your fourth, fifth outfielder on your bench. I have it as Jesse Winker, but I think if you want to be more realistic, this final bench spot probably does go to DJ Stewart, which was given a major league contract. So it makes you sleep better well at night that you want this to be pick your left-handed below average defending corner outfielder. So for me, I think it's more fun for Jesse Winker, but if it's better, you can have DJ Stewart. It's most likely it is going to be DJ Stewart. So after all the moves, let's see the new lineup, the rotation, and the new bullpen. Let's start with the rotation. I still think Senga will still get the game one start on opening day. I think he's deserved it. Yoshinobu Yamamoto comes in at the number 2. Again, you're paying him high money to be that number 2, pair with Senga to be that top end of that rotation. Then you go to the number 3 spot, and Jordan Montgomery fill that spot, be that innings eater that you know he's been throughout his career. Jose Quintana would be the 4 in this scenario, so you would have 2 southpaws in the middle of your rotation who, when healthy, both can eat innings. In this scenario, the 5th starter would be Brian Wu. Again, he's probably ahead of a guy like Joey Lucchesi, Jose Budo, whoever else is in the depth chart. Obviously, the kids with Tidwell, Scott, Dom, those guys are about a year away, so Wu would get the first opportunity. Let's go to the bullpen. You know the closer. You know that back end's going to look like Edwin Diaz, Brooks Raley back. Then you throw Liam Hendricks as that other top setup, high leverage guy. You go to your middle relief with Ryan Stanek and Robert Stevenson. Your lower third being Jake Diekman, Grant Hartwig, and Drew Smith. Sadly, you are still here. And let's end it up with the lineup. Hypothetical lineup would be Brandon Nimmo leading off, Francisco Lindor in the 2 spot playing short. At first, Pete Alonso batting 3rd, batting 4th, Anthony Santander in right, batting 5th, Jorge Soler, he'll be the DH, batting 6th, the catcher, Francisco Alvarez, batting 7th, the left fielder, Hunter Renfroe, batting 8th, the second baseman, Ronnie Mauricio, and batting 9th, the third baseman, Brett Beatty. Bench, Omar Narvaez, Starling Marte, Nick Senzel, and either Jesse Winker or DJ Stewart. So that is my dream off season, keeping it a little realistic. Again, could I have had more fun? Say Shohei Ohtani and, Juan Soto trade, of course, but I try to keep it somewhat realistic. Payroll, again, keeping that $50 million and just throwing out. The payroll, obviously, must have to pay that, so it would be tacked on. But the current total payroll for this roster, the 26 guys, would be $292,640,000. It's me having fun as the armchair Rhino that I am. I have fun. I do this every year. And this is how I would put the opening day roster for the 2024 New York Mets. David Stearns, you have to do it better.